Okay, let's dive in. So, Robinson Crusoe. We'd all think we know the story, right? Castaway, island, survival. But what happens after? Our sources pick up when Crusoe is 61. He's back, he's rich, famous even. He's settled down on this nice farm in Bedfordshire. He's finally got that perfect middle state of life his dad always talked about. So, logically, that should be it. Adventure's over.
Absolutely. Yeah, that should have been the end of the story. He says himself he had plenty of money, sufficient for me and for those I had to leave it to.
Hmm.
He thought he'd finally beaten that native propensity to rambling, as he calls it.
Right, that itch to wander. He's resolved to just cultivate his land, enjoy his retirement in England, safe and sound.
Right, he doesn't stick with it.
He really doesn't, and that's what this deep dive is all about. We need to figure out what this chronic distemper, his words again, this like deep restlessness was. What makes a guy who has everything suddenly chuck it all and risk everything, including being hanged as a pirate? We'll look at the strange, frankly, kind of messed up society he returns to on his island, trace this huge, dangerous journey he takes next, and see if he actually finds wisdom in the end. So, yeah, what on earth makes him go back out there?
Well, at first, he really did try to settle.
Yeah.
He bought the farm, got the livestock, seemed to genuinely enjoy, fixing the place up, improving the land. He specifically chose activities he thought would effectually tie me up from any more excursions. He was trying to build an anchor.
But inside, it sounds like a real battle was raging. He describes this urge to go abroad hanging over him like a chronic distemper. It wasn't just itchy feet. It sounds like a genuine psychological burden.
Oh, completely. It becomes his total obsession. His imagination, his fancy, he calls it, is constantly working on the island. He's dreaming about it all the time, waking up thinking he's chatting with the Spaniard governor he left there, or those reprobate sailors.
The bad apples he left behind?
Exactly. And what's really weird is he admits these daydreams, these imaginings, often felt strangely accurate. They had too much similitude, he says, to the actual nasty stuff those sailors were getting up at on the island. It's almost like these vapors, as he calls them, were sort of premonitions, or maybe just based on his pretty low opinion of human nature.
He starts framing it less like a personal failing and more like destiny, doesn't he? Like the invisible world is calling him. But the thing that actually pushes him over the edge, the immediate cause.
Tragedy.
Yes.
Yeah.
The loss of his wife, that was the tipping point. He says it was the single blow that unhinged me at once.
She was clearly his rock. Absolutely. He calls her the stay of all my affairs. And maybe more importantly, the engine that, by her prudence, reduced me to that happy compass. She kept him grounded, the wise counsel. Once she's gone, he feels totally adrift. As much alone as I was in my island, he says, just lost, like a ship without a rudder running afore the wind.
And right then, just as he's feeling completely lost and has secretly decided, okay, I'm going abroad again, but hasn't told anyone.
Perfect timing. His nephew shows up, the one he'd set up as a ship captain.
Offers him a voyage to the East Indies?
And not just any voyage. The nephew says they plan to touch at the Brazils, meaning he could drop Crusoe off right back at his old island.
Wow, talk about coincidence.
Well, Crusoe sees it as confirmation, the concurrence of second causes with the idea of things. It's like, okay, it's not just me wanting this, it's meant to be. So, yeah, goodbye, stable life. Hello, wandering again.
Okay, so before he sets sail again, around early 1695, he gets ready. And the way he prepares tells you a lot about his mindset now. He's meticulous, but also pretty cynical.
Oh, very cynical. He brings a massive amount of stuff. Linen for 7 years. 100 extra guns, like 3 or 4 tons of lead, brass cannons. He's basically equipping a small fort.
And people, too, right? Skilled workers.
Yeah, carpenters, a smith, a cooper, a tailor, specialists. But here's the cynicism. He specifically doesn't bring a framed sloop like a boat kit and extra guns he could have brought. Why? Because he was worried those 3 English rogues he'd left behind would use them to turn pirates. He flat out doesn't trust his own countrymen with too much power.
And turns out he was right not to trust them. When he gets back to the island, he finds it's, well, materially okay, but socially a mess.
A total mess. Those 3 English rogues had been causing constant trouble for the Spaniards and the others. Relentless conflict.
It becomes this real clash of values, almost.
Exactly. The Spaniards, led by that Governor Crusoe had rescued years ago, they come across as incredibly virtuous. Universally modest, temperate, virtuous, Crusoe says. When the English guys provoke them, the Spaniards actually refuse to retaliate immediately. They disarm them, sure, but they argue that the colony isn't strong enough for internal fighting. They choose stability over revenge.
Which is pretty striking. The people Crusoe might have once called savages, and the Spanish Catholic governor, they're the ones acting with restraint and wisdom. The Englishmen, pure chaos.
Precisely. And the chaos only stopped for a bit because the three villains demanded to leave, sailed off, and then came crawling back 22 days later.
What happened to them?
They got captured by other natives, almost eaten. Apparently the experience nauseated their very stomachs. So basically terror and failure taught them a little humility, for a while anyway.
Okay, so how do they finally solve this internal strife? Politics? Nope. Marriage?
Yeah, basically. Once things calmed down a bit, the big issue is the lack of women. So they decide to take the 5 women who'd been rescued from cannibals earlier as temporary wives.
And the virtuous Spaniards?
They declined, very politely, said they already had wives back home or didn't want to marry non-Christians. So it fell to the Englishmen.
They drew lots for the women.
They did. And the guy who got first pick chose the homeliest and oldest one.
Why?
Pure pragmatism. He figured it was application and business they were to expect assistance in, as much as in anything else. He wasn't looking for a beauty queen. He was looking for a reliable work partner. This was about building a functional household, a labor unit.
This whole new domestic setup then leads to some unexpected, well, spiritual stuff, especially with Will Atkins. He was one of the original bad guys, right?
Yeah, one of the worst. But then a French Catholic clergyman arrives with Crusoe. He refuses to marry the Englishmen to the women unless the women are baptized. This forces a discussion about conversion. And Atkins has this moment. He basically says, how can I teach my wife about Christianity? I'm too wicked and ignorant myself.
And what does the clergyman say?
It's a great line. He tells Atkins all he needs is repentance, because none teach repentance like true penitence. Basically, your past sins make you the best person to teach about turning away from sin.
Wow. So this actually leads to real change, even for Atkins.
It seems so. It kickstarts this process of transformation. It shows that even the most, reprobate soul can change when they're kind of forced into responsibility and maybe genuine reflection.
And this new stability, converted men, family structures, it leads to this burst of creativity, right? The whole island gets organized differently.
Yeah, they set up 3 distinct settlements, and there's this amazing cross-pollination of skills. The native women teach things, the men teach things, and they develop this incredible basket work construction technique.
That's where Will Atkins' house comes in.
Exactly. Atkins, now described as industrious, useful, and sober, builds this enormous basket house. It's 120 paces around, partitioned into rooms and warehouses. Crusoe looks at the whole setup, the organized settlements, everyone working, and says the colony looked like bees in a hive. Order out of chaos, finally. Self-sufficient.
So Crusoe sees this perfectly ordered little society he helped create, and then he leaves it. Early 1695, he sails away, heading for Brazil. He finally achieved the stable life, only to walk away again.
And almost immediately, he's plunged back into the harsh realities of the world outside his island. And frankly, the civilized world proves pretty brutal.
They find that ship, right? The one from Bristol.
Yeah, blown way off course by a hurricane. Just starving.
Right.
A terrible sight. It's such a stark contrast to the functioning little colony he just left.
And the story of the mother on board is just awful. A woman of sense and good breeding, apparently.
And the crew basically let her starve. Passively murdered her, you could say. She kept giving her tiny rations to her teenage son and the others. Just watched her waste away. Neglect.
Crusoe spent years worrying about cannibals, and then he finds this kind of slow-motion, callous brutality among Europeans.
It's the savagery of desperation, maybe. When society breaks down, the veneer of civilization is incredibly thin. They prioritize themselves over this woman and her son.
And the maidservant's account, that's even rougher.
Oh, it's visceral. She talks about going mad with hunger, having fits of lunacy, and the detail. Being so desperate, she ran to drink her own nosebleed from a basin. Just swallowed it down because she was starving.
Wow. That tells you everything about how bad things were, just drinking her own blood. Even Crusoe, who's seen a lot, is shocked by that.
It really strips away any romantic notions. They give them food and water, save the survivors, but that mother's sacrifice, it's just brutal evidence of what happens when things fall apart.
And the violence just keeps coming. Not long after, near Brazil, they get attacked.
A massive attack. 126 canoes full of indigenous warriors. Crusoe says it was 5 nations fighting against 2 other nations. A huge conflict happening right there on the water.
And this is where Friday.
Yeah, this is the devastating moment. Friday, his loyal companion for decades, his student, maybe his closest friend, he's killed instantly. 3 arrows,
Yeah.
just like that.
Oh, man. After everything they'd been through together.
The loss is immense. And Crusoe's reaction is pure grief, but also just cold fury.
He orders a broadside, doesn't he? Lets them have it with the cannons.
A massive one.
Yeah.
5 guns with small shot, 4 with large shot. He says they sank 13 or 14 canoes instantly. Total devastation. They managed to capture 1 survivor.
Who won't talk at first?
Nope. Stone silent. Until they literally toss him overboard, then fish him out again. Then he talks.
And why the huge attack? What was the reason for this massive fleet?
His explanation is almost bafflingly simple. He says they came to make TT Great Wonder look.
Just to watch, or to make a spectacle of the fight.
It seems like it. Just incomprehensible violence, maybe for status, or just the conflict itself. Terrifying, really. So they bury Friday at sea. A solemn ceremony, 11 guns fired.
That loss. You'd think that would be the moment Crusoe finally says, okay, enough, I'm going home.
You would think.
Yeah.
But no. He keeps going.
Yeah.
Pushes on with this massive journey, Madagascar, Bengal. And in Bengal, he runs into a different kind of danger. Not natives, but Europeans. His own people, effectively.
The East India Company.
Exactly. He gets word that English and Dutch ships are planning to seize his vessel. They see him as an interloper.
Meaning?
An illegal trader. Someone operating outside the official monopoly of the big trading companies like the East India Company.
Yeah.
To them, he's basically a pirate, a smuggler.
And the punishment for that?
Hanging, swift justice, or injustice, depending on your view. He only escapes because he gets tipped off just in time, has a sharp fight, and has to completely change his plans. No sailing home the easy way. He's forced east towards China and Siberia just to save his skin. So circumstances force him overland. He ends up traveling from Tonkin, which is sort of northern Vietnam area, all the way to Pekin, modern Beijing, tagging along with a Mandarin officials group.
And his opinion of China, well, he's not exactly impressed, is he? Reads as incredibly dismissive now.
Shockingly so, yeah. He calls the Chinese ignorant, sordid slaves. He looks at their huge armies and basically scoffs, claims 30,000 good European soldiers could wipe the floor with them.
Is that just Defoe writing British superiority, or is there more to it in the text? Why is Crusoe so down on this empire everyone else seemed to admire?
It seems to be his very pragmatic, almost utilitarian mindset. He sees the grandeur, the size, the wealth, but he thinks it's all inefficient, based on beggarly pride, as he puts it. It's all show, no substance, in his view. He does note some odd things, like this weird house, a China warehouse, he calls it timber frame, plastered with porcelain clay, shiny black tile roof. He sees it as a curiosity, a singularity, but not necessarily impressive.
He just values function over everything else, and then he joins that huge caravan heading west.
Yeah, over 100 men. They travel across vast deserts, go over the Great Wall of China, which he also dismisses, calls it a mighty nothing compared to Roman walls back in Britain. Again, it's size versus perceived utility.
And this part of the journey leads to maybe his most aggressive act, the idol incident.
Definitely. He gets absolutely furious about the religious practices of the Tungus people in Siberia. He sees their idol, this 8-foot-tall thing made of wood covered in sheepskins, no legs, and just cannot handle their brutish worship.
He decides he has to destroy it.
He does. He teams up with a Scottish merchant in the caravan, hatches a plan involving tar, tallow, brimstone, gunpowder. The works. They completely burn the idol down. And they actually tie up the local priests, the shamans, force them to watch it burn, basically to prove their idol had no power to save itself.
Wow. That's militant Protestantism taken to an extreme, just imposing his beliefs with fire and gunpowder.
It really shows that even after all his experiences, all the time alone, all the reflections, Crusoe still has this powerful urge to impose his sense of order on the world, even if it means burning down someone else's sacred object thousands of miles from home.
But then maybe the most important encounter of this whole second journey happens. He winters in Tobolsky, way up in Siberia, like 60 degrees latitude, freezing, and he meets someone unexpected.
Prince Golitsyn, a Russian nobleman, a former high-ranking official who'd been banished there, a political exile.
So a prisoner, basically, but he's happy.
Surprisingly, yes. Content, even. Crusoe, ever the escape artist, actually offers to help him get away, offers him a route back to Europe, but the prince refuses. Flat out.
Why would he refuse freedom?
The prince tells him he enjoys his blessed confinement. He's found peace in exile. He says true greatness isn't ruling others, it's being master of yourself. He actually believes he's happier, more fulfilled in banishment than he ever was back in the Tsar's court with all its power and temptations. He says he finally understands that virtue only makes a man truly wise, rich, and great.
So the man who's physically confined has found internal liberty.
Exactly. He tells Crusoe he wouldn't go back even if he could because he fears the seeds of pride, ambition, avarice, and luxury might revive in him. He's found peace by losing everything externally. It's the ultimate paradox for Crusoe, isn't it? Here's a man who actively chooses confinement because it brought him inner peace, the very thing Crusoe seems to have been chasing and failing to find his entire life all over the globe. Hashtag tag outro.
What a journey, huh? When you track the second part of his life, it's just immense. From his island prison to witnessing starvation horrors at sea, losing Friday, nearly getting hanged in Bengal, trekking across China, burning idols in Siberia. He finally gets back to London in January 1705. He's 72 years old. This last trip took him 10 years and 9 months.
And the core irony, the big takeaway, really comes from that encounter with the Russian prince, doesn't it? Crusoe spent his whole life trying to escape external limits, his father's expectations, the island, England itself. But the prince shows him that true freedom, that middle state of peace he supposedly wanted, wasn't about geography at all. It was internal.
He had to learn the value of retirement and peace from a man who was forced into it.
Precisely. The wisdom was in the confinement, not the escape.
So Crusoe finally gets back, says he understands the blessing of ending his days quietly. But you have to wonder, after all that chaos, all that globe-trotting and violence, was the real deep dive he needed, not across the world, but into himself, into that restless soul that took decades and tragedies to maybe finally find a little bit of peace? Something for you to think about.